Hi, everybody. Welcome into the Bulls Talk podcast brought to you by Toyota. Let's go places. I'm Kevin Anderson, joined by my good friends KC Johnson, our insider for the Chicago Bulls at NBC Sports Chicago and NBCSportsChicago.com, and our podcast producer, Tony Gill. Gentlemen, this is the mailbag episode. We're going to do a two-part episode this week. We submitted people asked questions, submitted questions from our fans and our viewers, and we got some really, really good stuff. Quick note, I half jokingly asked for anybody has any Star Wars questions to toss those my way too. And we actually have some pretty good Bulls / Star Wars questions in there. So Casey, I will handle anything Star Wars related unless you feel like you want to chime in on those questions.
I'm good. Thank you for asking.
So let's dive into it. We got a lot of really good stuff about the team and specific stuff about players and the offseason and where they are. Thank you to everybody who submitted a question over the last couple days to us. We will answer as many as we can in this two-part episode, but let's dive right in to the first question. Casey, this is something that there was a common theme in a lot of the questions I saw asked. Who is more likely to go first, Zach LaVine or Nikola Vucevic? Whether it's this offseason or before the trade deadline in season, this question was from Bulls Central YT.
I maintain there's a chance that neither is dealt, but I maintain if one or both are dealt, it's going to be Zach first. I mean, he's, say what you want about Zach LaVine. He's until last season one of the more elite and efficient scorers in this league. He was on a 3-season heater basically, and obviously he's looking to regain his form this year after the injury-plagued 23-24 campaign. And I just think at some point, some team's going to need scoring, and, injuries happen or circumstances happen where a team is struggling. And as skilled and as talented as Vooch is, he obviously plays a position that's less in vogue in today's day and age. So I think Zach will be the first one of those two moved.
To me, the easier contract of the two is certainly Vucevic. He's making, less than half of what Zach LaVine is. But I would go the category of neither will be traded at this point. Vucevic, I think certainly while there is a possibility there that he gets moved with his contract, I don't think it's necessarily likely. I don't think there's a trade market for Vucevic right now. I think that given the season he had last year offensively, I don't think there's much of an interest around the league in what he can provide right now. Now, if he has a great, first 3 months of the season and his shooting form is back to mid-30s on his three-point shot, and he becomes the playmaker that we know he has shown in flashes before, I think maybe interest might be there by the trade deadline. But I don't think necessarily I wouldn't term it likely that Vucevic gets traded. And certainly to your point, KC, about Zach. Zach is the better player. He's younger. He's got more upside, but his contract makes it a little bit more difficult to move on that end. And I think as you reported before, the Bulls are not in a position where they feel they have to trade either one of those players, certainly specific to Zach, to incentivize that with a first-round draft pick. So I would say both players are likely to be on this roster unless you get a situation in which a team feels like they need one of those two players to put them over the top to make a playoff run or make a deeper playoff run than what's expected. Tony, any opinion on your end about which player is more likely to be moved?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with your initial, premise that I don't think either of them, are going, and we should start wrapping our heads around that more than likely possibility that both Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic will be on this roster. But even more so, just to answer the question, shout out to Bull Central YT, it's got to be Zach, right? Because at least there was some semblance of a market, some rumblings and rumors that one, as Casey has repeatedly reported, that both sides, the Bulls and Zach LaVine, would prefer to part ways at this point. And two, they've been dangling him for over a year now, trying to see what they can, get and we talked about it on the last episode that they would prefer not to attach a first-round pick to Zach LaVine just to get off the contract, but they want to move on from him, and it's just a matter of, do they have the ability to? So that's the reason why it's more likely that he goes. There's zero market for Nikola Vucevic. You don't hear of anything. You don't see anything. Not even a fake rumor or false report. We saw that Zach LaVine was trending over like a false, like made up report, right? Like there's none of that even with Nikola Vucevic at this point. And we can look at it. There's a whole other podcast on why that is. But just to answer the question so we can move on, yeah, there's no market for Vooch around the league, and that makes it more likely that Zach will be moved.
Okay, our next question comes from our friend C Red Fred, who asks, with the son playing basketball at the high school level, I'm curious if you have a window into how many shots these guys, being professional NBA players, are taking in their off season on a daily basis to improve. And specific to UKC, in your time as a beat writer, what two Bulls teammates had the greatest dislike for each other, and how did it affect the overall well-being of the team?
I mean, I think the benchmark you often hear is 500 shots from guys. I mean, there's no direct formula or standard formula, but I mean, that's a number you hear a lot. Yeah, I got 500 shots up. So that's typically an off-season goal that I've heard. Again, some players are probably coming short of that. Some players are probably surpassing that, and it probably depends on the day. So I don't think there's any ironclad answer to that. As far as the latter one, I probably have told this story before, and I don't want to speak to whether or not they disliked each other, because they obviously ended up working together at one point at ESPN. But man, when Jay Williams got to the Bulls, there was quite a bit of tension amongst the team, and it was exacerbated when he took Michael Jordan's locker. Michael Jordan's locker had sat vacant from 1998 to Jay Will's arrival in 2001. And Jay Williams had already kind of had an image of kind of being a pompous or pampered dookie. And then he came in and took Michael Jordan's locker, which didn't help matters. And Jalen Rose, Mr. Old school Detroit dude, didn't really, bad boy, or I should say, what were the Fab Five guy didn't really take too well to that. There's already a Michigan Duke rivalry, and Jalen Rose, I will never forget this. After the game one of the season, a shocking and surprising upset victory in Boston, where the Bulls won on the road in what was supposed to be a rebuilding year. Jay Williams missed multiple free throws down the stretch over the last 2 minutes, and the Bulls still pull out the victory. And we went up to Jalen Rose to talk about the unlikely victory, thinking it was all going to be seashells and balloons and happiness. And Jalen Rose, unsolicited, said, the young buck, or whatever he called him, the young buck needs to work on free throws. In the NBA, we just call that choking. So Jay Williams and Jalen Rose had they had force of will hitting against each other pretty often that first year. It was pretty amusing.
Did that relationship get better over the course of the season?
Jalen got traded that season. Hopefully my memory is right on that. I'll quickly look that up. To the Pacers. So he wasn't around much. No, it did not get much better. And like I said, they ended up working together at ESPN. I'm sure if you ask them now, they're good. I've talked to both guys about it over the years. I had some fun with it. But it was definitely there was some tension. Trust me on that, especially when Jay Williams first got here. I think Jalen wanted him to earn his stripes, and not just come in and act like he owned the place. So he was kind of going old school on him. But I want to say that trade was in 2000. Look at that, February of 2002. So they weren't even together a full season. So it was a storyline that we were paying attention to on the beat that season. Let's just put it that way.
The opposite of the relationship that Joakim Noah and Derrick Rose had together.
Correct.
The complete 180 of that. I will say, for Fred's question specifically about the shots thing, don't neglect the other areas of basketball. It's easy for, I think, in today's age, with Steph Curry being most kids' idols, that feel like they want to get out and get up 500 shots or 1,000 shots. But there are so many different ways to impact a basketball game besides just pure shooting. Certainly that is important, and that's what a lot of coaches look for in scoring. But playing good fundamental defense and having a high basketball IQ and learning other fundamentals like how to box out, how to rebound, how to play defense both individually and within a scheme are all very important skills that can impact the basketball game. So, as you work with your son, don't have his entire practice session each day be 500 shots and then go inside. Certainly ball handling is a big part of that as well. So that's my answer to that. Tony, anything you want to add?
Yeah, and I talked to KC about this before we did the Matas interview of just about youth sports and youth athletes, the importance of rest and the importance of working out other muscles that basketball doesn't get to, just because of the state and how the game is played. Those two are key, especially now where we're seeing an uptick in injuries on the NBA level, right? Because they're playing so much basketball, specifically before they get there. So as you want to get your work in, you want to get your practice in, but also rest days are key in working out other muscles via other sports. And if you don't want to do other sports, just take the day and do some exercises of other build muscles and joints and things of that nature, and give those basketball joints a rest. So those are my things. The ones in my lifetime, and I know KC has a has thoughts on those, was the alpha team,
the three alphas,
the three alpha issue, and then just kind of the later relationship between Jimmy and Derek.
That's a good one too.
Those were kind of the ones that I thought about in terms of relationships that really impacted the teams that they were on.
Yeah, I mean, the Rondo one was obviously, that's a great one. That fascinating, because the young players really gravitated towards Rajon, and Jimmy and Dwayne were kind of on their own island, and it coalesced most spectacularly when Rondo blistered them on Instagram one day late in the season.
Not my bets.
Posted a shot of him and Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett and talked about leadership, and so that was man, I'll never forget that day. We the crazy part about that is they obviously rallied from that incident to make the playoffs, and I remember everyone on the beat just wrote like season over, team in turmoil, no chance they recover from this, a broken core. So we were all wrong. They proved us wrong because they played great basketball in the stretch, and Rondo was a big part of that. So I'll never forget that season. Yeah, and then the Derek Jimmy one was that crazy playoff game where they're like passively aggressively. Derek was kind of passing off the ball to in that Cleveland last game of the Tom Thibodeau era. So yeah, there's so many stories on the Bulls beat over the years.
That Rondo series was the Celtics series in which he got hurt, right?
Correct.
I maintain they would have won that series if Rondo had been able to stay healthy.
They were up 2-0 on the road, and Rondo was calling out their plays before they even ran them. It was quite the scout.
And that second half against that Cavs series was just like it was a trek in a funeral procession. Like I just remember them at the time because I think they ended up getting blown out in that game. It's just like the energy just completely left the building and left the bench at that time. A lot of good memories by KC Johnson there, sharing that, and a good Tony on the Alphas team because that was something. All right, next question comes from at Trancy 2007, basically asking Lauri comp, Matas, can they be compared? This is a pretty good comp to me. I mean, we're 5 summer league games into Buzelis' Bulls career, so I think we're way early in terms of comparisons. But I do see a little bit of Markkanen's game in Buzelis. Do you guys see that at all in the way he plays, or is that even an unfair comp to make?
Tony, you go first in this one.
This was like one of the first questions that we got, and I instantly liked. I was like, I like this one, because it also it recalls to my mind just a couple different questions out of that observation. Is if that's the comp, what didn't they see in Lauri that they now see in Matas? Because to me, their games are similar. Long, tall guys that love to finish at the rim and can shoot the three ball. Lauri Markkanen, right, was setting all types of Bulls records, and I didn't even know it was a record in terms of mix of threes and dunks. I didn't know that was a thing, but Lauri Markkanen, that was essentially his game, and that's what he continued in Utah, like being a leader in dunks and 3-point shots made or attempted. That's the modern NBA game. Can you get to the rim and can you shoot the 3-point shot? And I think those two specifically, since we're directly comparing them, I think that works and that matters in today's NBA. That's why you see things on social media about what Utah can get for Lauri Markkanen, and we're talking multiple first-round picks plus, a key player in return. Like, he has boosted his value across the the NBA space because of what he does. And I think Matas is similar. I don't think Matas is as big in terms of height wise, and obviously we got to wait and see what he grows into in terms of width wise and weight to bulk up like Lauri has obviously had a few years in the league and has made all-star. But I think it's not a bad comp to think about Lauri Markkanen in this space.
I'm more hesitant than you guys on this one for a couple of reasons. I think he's not obviously the 3-point shooter yet that Lauri was. And Lauri, for now, his ability to get it to the rim and dunk, he did not do that as much his first year or two. He was more on the perimeter a little bit. And then also, I think Buzelis actually has a chance to be a much better defender than Lauri Markkanen was. A comp that I heard from a scout while I was out there and a more recent player is Franz Wagner. And Wagner's not a great 3-point shooter, but he's got the ability to keep you honest from that distance. And I think Buzelis actually has got really strong ball handling ability. I think Lauri has kind of grown into that, but didn't really have that initially as much. So I don't know, man. We're always looking for comps. Let's see who he is in his own guys, but I probably would be a little more hesitant to make that comp than you guys.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that, Casey. I think the 3-point shooting is the thing that's probably separating Markkanen right now. I think Buzelis still has a little bit of ways to go to get to that point. But in terms of the skill set and athleticism, I think the aggressiveness that we saw in Summer League from Buzelis, that reminds me of Markkanen, like those kind of like thunderous dunks, those statement dunks. Now it's one thing to do it in Summer League, to do it in a regular season NBA game. But I get the comp and I'm on board with it. And if Buzelis turns into a fraction of the player that Markkanen is currently, then it's going to be a home run pick for the Bulls. Let's move on to some more questions. Casey, I'm going to target this with you first for this one. This is from C-Red Brazil. What are the Chicago Bulls' plans with Javonte Green, who is still available on the market? Any possibility of him returning this season? And then number two, any update on Lonzo Ball? Is Chicago considering trading him by the trade deadline after his return, or is that not even a possibility?
I mean, they're taking it slow with Lonzo in terms of just seeing how he comes through 5-on-5 scrimmaging in August. I mean, you've heard it from Billy Donovan, you've heard it from management, you've heard it from Lonzo himself. I mean, they all expect him to be at training camp. And, that's obviously assuming he gets through August scrimmaging healthy. But if he does, they expect him to be at training camp. And then where it goes from there, nobody knows. This is fairly unprecedented what he's trying to do. But, certainly if he is able to return at any kind of decent level, especially with Giddey on the roster now and him being an expiring contract, I would not be surprised if you hear his name in some rumors between now and the February trade deadline, maybe for a team that's looking to has that second apron issues or tax issues. But let's take it slow and focus on the basketball first, because he's attempting a pretty arduous comeback. As far as Javonte Green, obviously you can go over the 15-player limit in the offseason. You can carry up to 20 contracts. I believe the Bulls are at 19 with their 3 two-way guys right now. They might be at 18. I haven't looked at it lately. They've got 15 players targeted for the NBA roster. One of those is non-guaranteed and owner off the team. I certainly could see Javonte swapping out with him, but I have not heard anything to this point concrete on that. So as of right now, Javonte Green remains a free agent.
It'd be nice to see Javonte in a Bulls uniform again. I think he gave them a spark last season. Certainly, I think a lot of his play was a little bit of a surprise on how well he played, but he impacted games in March and April last year. And yes, they did not make the playoffs, but I don't think anybody puts that on Javonte. And I think certainly in regards to his ability, he can contribute to a team. He can be a good rotation member of a team. He's got a lot of skills that the Bulls certainly need. So, I'm rooting for Javonte, and I hope he finds a home somewhere around the league. And if it's with the Bulls, even better. Tony, anything you want to add to either one of those?
Yeah, to the Javonte Green point, I think it's interesting that when they were trying to win, they kind of stalled about adding him when they know they needed him. And once he joined back with the team, he instantly started impacting games when he started playing. So I think it's, do they see him as like a Caruso replacement, or Caruso light replacement? I don't know. If they're on this full rebuild thing or retool thing, I don't think you can have him back, because I think he impacts games positively for you. But if the goal is to go with this youth movement, see what you have with the guys. As much as I like Javonte Green, you gotta move on from him. And I think that's the interesting part, is he's such a like transitional piece. Do you want to add him to positively impact games in that way? Or are you full board of, look, we have to see what this young group has so we can move on? I think Javonte's positive impact on the team mucks that up a little bit.
Very good response there. I totally agree. Next question from Bulls Nation Brazil. The moves this offseason give the squad a different profile. I would like to know your opinion on Jevon Carter and Torrey Craig. Are they part of plans for the rotation? Or will they be left aside? Do you believe in the possibility of letting go of Craig and trying to trade Carter? Casey, we'll start with you with that one.
Well, I mean, Carter's quietly probably been available for a while. I mean, he's not in the rotation. He wasn't in the rotation as a celebrated free agent signing last season. So, he's got a player option in that third year. I'd be shocked if he picks that up at this point, because he wants to play. So this could be his last year in Chicago anyway. I don't see him in the rotation. They've got too many guards. He wasn't in the rotation last year. Obviously, if there's injuries, that can change things, but they've just got too many guards ahead of him on the depth chart. As for Torrey Craig, there were some people that were surprised that he picked up his option. I haven't had a chance to talk to him, but that could be a situation where he didn't have a lot of opportunity elsewhere, which might surprise me, because, he's a solid veteran that contributes to winning. Because I think he's going to have a tough time cracking the rotation, even though as far as forwards are concerned, they're not as deep as they are as guards. But you got Patrick Williams targeted for a lot of minutes. You got Matas Buzelis targeted for a lot of minutes in a developmental situation. You've got Josh Giddey probably playing some three, because you just got too many guards as it is. He'd obviously still be handling the ball a lot, but he'd be guarding probably threes. And then, Dalen Terry's played more as a wing than as a guard. So there's another guy you want to try to get some experience. So, and I didn't even mention Julian Phillips, who obviously is, trying to carve out some rotational minutes. So given that they're in a developmental phase, I don't know how Billy's going to play it, but Torrey Craig, I think, is going to be tough finding a lot of playing time for him as well.
My guess is that Craig took his player option because the free agent market next summer is going to be more robust, and he'll have a better chance of getting a long-term deal, at least more money. That's just kind of me looking at the tea leaves, if you will, for that. Certainly he probably consulted with his agent about the best course of what makes the most sense here for this. I think certainly with him being entering the final year of his contract, the chances of getting traded by the trade deadline are certainly possible. I think Craig brings a lot of value to the team. I would think he is part of the rotation. We've got a question later about the depth chart and that we'll get into specifically where we see guys fitting within certain roles. But specific to Craig, I think he's going to be part of the rotation just because he plays a position of need on this team. That's even with a healthy roster. He provides a certain amount of skills the Bulls need defensively up front. So I see him getting in the rotation a lot more than Carter. Carter, when he was signed a year ago, I think we all expected him to be a just junkyard dog on defense and hit some threes. His minutes last season, as we very well know, were inconsistent, and he wasn't that very impactful offensively with those minutes. And so I'm hoping he can find a spot in the rotation. But to what Casey just said, I think it becomes a depth chart roster minutes issue when it comes to Jevon Carter. Now, if somebody gets hurt or they do find a trade for Zach LaVine, then I think that changes things dramatically. But given the roster what it is right now, I don't see Carter really getting a lot of minutes. Certainly he fell out of favor in Billy Donovan's rotation last season, and no two teams are the same. Things can change very quickly come training camp. But Carter is another guy who is potential, what I think, a trade deadline, move next February for a team that thinks they could use Carter on their roster.
It's still crazy. It's still crazy to me. He played 81 games and started 39 of them for a 58-win Milwaukee team and shot 42% from three that year on 7 attempts per game. No, wait, I'm sorry. That's his 2-point. That's his overall field goal. He shot 42% from three on 4.2 attempts per game. So
yeah, still good. Still really good.
It's great. And I joked him one time. I was like, did Giannis make you that much better? Because man, he had like kind of he was such a professional, but he had a kind of a gallows humor bent to the lack of rotation playing time because it just got crazy. I mean, none of us expected him to play as little as he did last year. Now he did play in 72 games, but he only averaged 13.9 minutes, started 0. A lot of those were mop-up minutes. It's just weird to me how that played out last season. I still haven't figured that one out.
And I assume it's embarrassing too for him. It's like I do look what I did for an actual contender, and I can't see the court here. Like what? So I got something on that. But first, the Torrey Craig thing. I always thought he was coming back, right? Like the lasting image of Torrey Craig as a Bull is
the Drummond play,
the Drummond alley-oop miss thing.
Yeah.
And he was injured just on multiple occasions. So I'm like, he needs to reset his value before, again, like you mentioned, Bulldog, the free agency next year really kind of helps out guys to get long-term deals. So all around, he needed to come back regardless. Just if he can stay healthy, I think it will be a bonus for Torrey Craig. But the Jevon Carter thing, I guess my question is like, we saw and we all predicted, like, man, if he can do that, what he did with Milwaukee here, this would be an excellent bonus for this roster that they are continuing with Zach and DeMar and Vooch. But then Billy Donovan gets a hold of him and he's like, I'm good. So I guess my just question for you guys, and then we can move on, is like, what was the discrepancy between management and Billy on Jevon Carter and how to use him, because that we applauded that. Like we had him on the Bulls Talk podcast at Bulls Fest and everybody was excited about it. And then Billy Donovan didn't find a place for him on a consistent enough basis. So what was the issue in the offseason on what's the plan for Jevon Carter?
My sense is that like most people on the team last year, he started out very slowly shooting the ball. And if he's not making shots, obviously he's got the ability to pick up full court, and he did that pretty consistently, and he can defend that way. But if he's not making shots, his leash is a little bit shorter, and I think he got into some bad decision making. I think he started passing up some open shots, and I think he just kind of lost Billy's trust. And then look, some of the guys played better. I mean, we had him targeted for rotation. We had Ayo Dosunmu on the outside looking in. Oops, it's like, sometimes it's just you can't play everybody kind of thing. But I definitely know part of it was decision making, and just lack of trust. And that's really kind of what it came down to.
All right, last one for part 1 of our mailbag. We're certainly going to have part 2 later this week. We got a lot of great questions to certainly dive into. Casey, this is more geared towards you, especially with your love of music. This is from at Local Bulls Fan. I have 2. Have you guys ever been recognized in public before by Bulls fans? If so, can you describe the experience? And number 2, you have all mentioned your taste in music a little throughout episodes. Is there a music artist that you know of who is a Bulls fan who might be listening to the podcast? So, Casey, you're obviously recognized a lot more than Tony and I when it comes to being out.
We'll get to that in a second. I know there's some music fans who are NBA fans. I mean, the big one in the indie rock world that I usually move through is Win Butler from Arcade Fire. In fact, I stalked him at a Bulls playoff game. The Bulls-Hawks first-round playoff series way back in the Thibodeau era. The Arcade Fire had played the UIC Pavilion the night before, and they came as a band to the playoff game the next night. And I, of course, went up to talk to him at halftime because I'm a huge Arcade Fire fan. And he wanted to talk. He grew up in Houston. He wanted to talk Hakeem Olajuwon era Rockets, and I wanted to talk about the encore they played the night before and what guitar he used. So it's a classic example where musicians want to talk sports, and me as a sports writer want to talk music. So that's the one anecdote I can share there. How about you guys for the music answer?
I mean, there are the Bulls. It's interesting.
Common. I mean, not common. Chance the Rapper. Let's go.
Yes.
Come on.
Yes. Like Chance, if you're listening, thank you for listening to Bulls Talk podcast. We know that the specific to Chicago, but I think even globally, because of Michael in the 90s and this franchise, there are Bulls fans everywhere. We have a significant amount of Bulls fans in Australia. Part of that's because of Luke Longley, but part of that's because of Michael and the team itself in the 90s and the people who grew up in that era. So, music wise, there's no doubt in my mind, there are a lot of music artists who are Bulls fans, or at least grew up Bulls fans. Are they fans of this current team? And are they watching a majority of games every season the last 5 years? Probably not. Those music artists, those rock stars, if you will, have better things to do with their time. I'm guessing, create new albums and tour and all those things. So music-wise, Chance is my best bet for a music artist who listens to the Bulls Talk podcast.
Yeah, back in the Dynasty day, I was remiss to say, I mean, Eddie Vedder was obviously always hanging around from Pearl Jam, sang the national anthem before the game. I can't remember which game of the finals in '96 because he's from Seattle, he's from here, but had his fame in Seattle. He used to hang around with Robin all the time. So did Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins. So yeah, but I don't think anybody's listening to the Bulls Talk podcast unless Tony knows the chances. Tony.
Now the only person that I could think of is because I just recently seen it. If you don't know, I also contribute to the Bulls Talk social media account, and Lil B the Bass God has DM'd about joining. I didn't really see a
he did now. Shout out Lil B.
Yeah, so shout out Lil B. I haven't listened to any of his music this decade. So I don't know what he has out there, but there you go. I think that's the one that I probably have firsthand knowledge of. But other than that, like there's a lot of artists. Lil Durk, Bulls fan. I think he went viral for trying to convince LeBron to join the Bulls. He said he'd pay his contract. Common obviously is a Bulls fan. But yeah, there's a bunch of, I don't know who listens to this podcast specifically, because you really, really gotta be like, I need my Bulls fix. And those obviously they have other things to do other than worry about what's going on with the Bulls. But yeah, that's Lil B was the only one that I can think of.
Common's got movies to make in addition to music. He's got John Wick films to make. Shout out Lil B. That's good. Casey, what about the being recognized in public part of that question?
So the answer is yes. In fact, it happened last night, and I was telling my son that I was with last night that I've actually gotten to the point where I can tell when somebody recognizes me. And I will just say I got in this business to be an anonymous great byline in the Chicago Tribune because I'm old. So that's back in the day you never thought you'd be recognized. I will say that I, having covered this team for as long as I have, I was getting recognized even as a newspaper person down the stretch of my time with the Tribune. And then that's obviously jumped exponentially since I've come over to this awesome place and gotten the TV opportunities that I've gotten. So yes, I get recognized all the time. I'm always very appreciative. I'm also always a little humbled by it. I usually tell people that want to take a selfie, or some people even ask for my autograph. I always say, like, you do know I'm not a player, right? So, but the only time I ham it up is when I'm with my wife, because she is absolutely mortified when I'm embarrassed or when I'm recognized. She just wants to crawl underneath a rock. So I really ham it up in public if I'm recognized with my wife, because then I just, make her even more uncomfortable than she already is.
It's happened to me a handful of times. I always appreciate it when it does. I love talking Bulls at all times. I mean, it's that kind of joke that we do this podcast. I'm doing it for free anyway in our newsroom and with my friends in our group chats and with everybody here, just talking about the Bulls and what's going on with the team. So this aspect of it, I love doing anyway. So I always appreciate it when somebody, and what I really enjoy the most about it is hearing what they think. Like, they often will ask me about, what I think about X, Y, or Z. But I like hearing what other people think about, whether it's what to do with Zach LaVine, or, certain what their opinion of the head coach is, or what they should do trade wise. I like hearing from Bulls fans all the time. So if you're out there and you ever see me, don't be shy. I love talking Bulls. What about you, Tony?
I got more recognized when I was actually in radio. People they hear my voice, I'm like, that sounds familiar.
Voice of God.
Yeah. But yeah, so more previously in my career, more than now, because now I'm more behind the scenes of things, even though, of course we do the Bulls Talk podcast. So, once people, kind of recognize the voice of, if they're a 670 The Score fan, they still mention me from time to time on the Score. I actually hosted a couple Fridays ago with Jason Leisure, and Lawrence Holmes. So yeah. I mean, people have come up to me sometimes, and want to talk and stuff like that. I'm like, I'm not important enough to take any pictures, so nobody has asked for a picture. But they do want to talk, and that's fun. That's totally fine. So if you ever want to talk Bulls real quick while I'm out, we can do that for a little while.
We appreciate Bulls fans in all mediums. So thank you for listening and watching, and whether it's a game or pregame show or a podcast, we read a column and read a story, read a tweet. We appreciate it always. So this has been part 1 of our Bulls Talk podcast, brought to you by Toyota. Let's Go Places mailbag edition. We are going to do part 2 later in the week, and we got so many questions. Hell, we may be having part 3. We'll have to talk that through. But thank you for everybody submitted. If you didn't get your question answered in this edition of the podcast, please listen to the next one. We've got a lot more questions to get to about the state of the team, some really good stuff specific about Buzelis and the depth chart. So thank you, everybody. For KC Johnson, you can look at his work on Twitter at KCJHoop, and certainly at NBCSportsChicago.com. And for Tony Gill, our podcast producer behind the scenes, I'm Kevin Anderson. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Go Bulls.
All right, now that's over. I want to tell you the 3 keys to being a real Chicago sports fan. It takes guts, sacrifice, and downloading the NBC Sports Chicago app. When there's highlights, you can pounce on them. When there's exclusive insights, you listen and take notes. And you won't get blindsided with the push alerts. So download it